Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this Wednesday's webinar presented by the U.S. Lacrosse Athlete Development Department. Um, we're very pleased to have and be able to provide you with our speaker this evening, Bobby Audley, and the topic of connecting with your team. Before I get too crazy into the introduction of Bobby and why we're doing this, just wanted to point out a couple of things. Number one, you are on mute when you entered the webinar this evening, so we will not be able to hear you if you have a question. But you do have the ability to ask questions via the toolbar that is on your screen. So all you gotta do is click on there and you can type your question in, and at the end we'll leave some time for question and answer, and I will field those questions, shoot them over to Bobby, and he will give us some responses to the best as he can. If you're joining us for the third time with Bobby, you know the passion and energy that he brings to these things. It's going to be a fantastic experience. He and I were just chatting a little bit about it, and I'm already fired up to hear what he has to say because he's an outstanding speaker, very motivational, and as well as gives very practical tools for you to take home and use with your athletes as we move forward. Also, just a little housekeeping issue. If you missed the first two webinars of this series, they are going to be available by the first week of April on the learning management system of US Lacrosse. You can find that at learning.uslacrosse.org. You also will be receiving an email at the conclusion of this webinar with a link to view the recording of tonight's session. Feel free to take that link, share it with friends, family, teammates, whatever and whoever you think would benefit most from it. So with that being said, we're going to get rocking and rolling. So the whole reason for these webinars, the series that we've run for the past 3 weeks, is that when we look at athlete development as a whole, there's really 4 areas that we need to focus on in terms of helping a player reach their full potential. There's the technical skills, right? If it involves the word technique, like shooting, scooping, dodging, that falls into that red bucket there. Then there's the tactical skills, right? The X's and O's of the game, the plays you diagram, the systems you put in place. Those are the easy two. We typically do a very good job with those as coaches. Then we have the physical skills, right? The ability to run, hop, skip, jump, twist, turn, lift weights, sprint, whatever, right? The physical characteristics of the individual athlete. Again, we typically do a pretty good job of that as coaches. The blue square is really where we're focusing on with this webinar series, and that's the psychosocial part. And that's really what arguably makes the biggest difference in your team. You hear all the time about on social media, high fives change lives, right? When athletes and coaches can connect, it makes such a difference for those athletes and for that team. And a ton of other things. The culture of your program. You can have a group of really talented athletes, but if the culture is not right, they're not going to perform to their optimum levels. And so we wanted to provide this webinar series to help coaches, program administrators, parents, athletes, anybody involved in sport, have some tangible things that they can take back and use with their programs to help develop that psychosocial piece of their athletes. So a little bit about Bobby here. Bobby Audley is a nationally recognized team building and group dynamic facilitator and speaker that's able to bring a group in through his warmth, humility, and tremendous ability to connect through life. Bobby began his career working in higher education as a leadership specialist. After his time as an NCAA lacrosse player, Bobby spent time coaching lacrosse at the junior college level and 3 years working for Project Ascent, specializing in team development. Bobby has also spent 3 years as the founder of Outside the Zone, a leadership speaking company, before joining the Pinot Training Group in 2015. Bobby has twice been featured on the TEDx stage, speaking on growth through difficulty and how to build meaningful connections with others. Just one highlight, if you haven't seen it yet, hop onto YouTube at some point and look for his talk on 50 cups of coffee and making connections just with people just over a cup of coffee and how that can impact and enrich your life. It's a fantastic talk. I'm probably not doing it any justice compared to what Bobby actually delivers, but it's well worth your time. And those TED Talks are relatively short, easily digestible, so something great to watch when you just have a couple of minutes of time. So with that being said, I'm going to turn over the microphone and the controls to Bobby, and we're going to get started here. So if you would please, while I'm doing that, we can't hear you, but give a rousing round of applause for Bobby Audley, our speaker this evening. And Bobby, just in a second, you will have controls.
All right, thank you, TJ. Do I have the, oh, here we go. Show my screen. Awesome. Thank you, TJ. Thanks for handing that over. Thank you, as always, for the introduction. And thank you once again to US Lacrosse for the opportunity to present this three-part series of webinars on the topic of creating a positive and powerful team culture. This is the final webinar in the series, and the three have built on top of each other. Certainly you can take this one in on its own, and to fully implement the principles we're talking about, it is my recommendation to go back and listen to the first two as well if you haven't done so already, or if you weren't on those calls before. That is not simply because they're the webinars I did. I did build these to say, let's talk about this concept, this topic over the course of more than just one webinar. As I've said before, my goals for the entire series are, number one, to define the idea of what do we mean when we talk about a team. We tackled that in the first webinar in week one of defining what it means to really be a team and an effective team. Number two is provide tools for creating a culture. We tackled this last week by talking about the energy you bring to a team. Certainly there are many tools for creating culture, and we as an organization truly believe that step one in that process is really being intentional, understanding and being intentional about how you show up and the energy you bring to your team or to any space or environment that you are in. And number three is providing tools for sustaining that culture. My final goal is this, and it really is saying, like, let's talk about how you connect with your players. The culture being sustained is you as a coach really genuinely connecting with players, and I am excited about this because this is hands down the number one question I get from coaches after sessions, after our trainings with them, after workshops, after they read some of our content. It is, how do I connect with today's young athlete? And so if you were on with us last week, please know, and the week before, please know the beginning of this, as always, is the only repeat in the entire session. But I think it is important to give some context as to who we are, the Pinot Training Group, and who I am, and quite frankly, why should you listen to us? Why should you care what we have to say when it comes to team culture development? Myself, I grew up just outside of Syracuse, New York, went to Liverpool High School. I've played lacrosse my entire life, from youth leagues to school teams to club travel teams. And in college, I played NCAA Division II at Mercyhurst University and NCLL club lacrosse at Salisbury University. After college, I was an assistant coach for the men's team at Harford Community College in Maryland. While at HCC, I was also working as the student leadership and orientation specialist, so doing a lot of the same work I'm doing now. And currently, I am the head middle school boys coach at the Murray School in Washington, D.C. Professionally, TJ touched on some of this, but I've been doing this work for 8 years now, again, twice on the TEDx stage. We'll talk a little bit about the 50 Cups of Coffee Challenge today in this workshop as it pertained to connection. And I'm a lead facilitator with the organization called the Pinot Training Group, which we've mentioned since 2008. This group has served over 500,000 people, 650 plus teams. Last year alone, we worked with 80,000 people. I joined Pinot Training Group 3 years ago for the sole purpose of bringing their work in team culture development to athletic teams. I had participated in one of their trainings called Heart of a Leader. And during that training, I walked up to Ryan, who was the facilitator and the founder of the company, and I asked him if they'd ever worked with athletes. And certainly they had athletes in the room, but had you ever specifically worked with a team? And he said they had not. And for me, I looked at the work they did as just a tremendous fit for the world of athletics. And it became my mission to bring this work to athletics, to teams, to coaches. And so that is, I mean, for the last 3 years, I have been working with Ryan, and he and I have been working our butts off to build a reputation in athletics and have brought this work to teams at the schools and organizations listed below. We've worked with teams at Maryland, Northwestern, UNC, Virginia Tech. We've worked with a Team USA. We've worked with high school club travel teams. And I share this to say that what we're doing works. What we talked about in the last 2 weeks, it works. I'm watching it work. I'm seeing it work. I'm learning from coaches of what works and what doesn't work, and we're continuing to hone and do things differently. In the first week, I shared a testimonial from our work in team culture development from a Northwestern coach. Last week was from a Maryland coach, and this week I have one from a coach at the Citadel, which I'm proud to share, and I think is relevant before we get this whole thing started, because the Citadel is a military college, for those of you who aren't familiar, and we worked with this particular coach at his previous institution. And one of the first things he did when he got to the Citadel was to ask his athletic director to bring us in to work with his team. Now, of course, as a military college, the AD was skeptical as to why they would need to bring in an outside coach for what he viewed as quote unquote leadership training. And the next year, the coach lobbied again and made clear that this is not about leadership training. This is about a team operating as one, functioning as a unit, becoming genuine friends and family, connecting at a level of depth most people do not connect at, creating a culture of player-led accountability, creating an energy on a team that people want to be a part of. And the AD's response was, well, you must really believe in this because you have not relented, so let's do it. And I think there's some power to that, to give some of you that are trying to spearhead this some inspiration that there are a lot of people out there that really believe in team culture, the distinction it has between leadership development, and how all are needed with our athletes today. The quote that's next to the one from the coach comes from a player. We worked with a team just this past weekend at University of North Carolina, and after the day, one of the players shared this quote of, "Today I gained an overall feeling of freedom." And as I shared in the first webinar, our goal with creating a culture is so that your players feel free to be themselves, free to take risks without fear, free to bring energy without it being tampered down, free to bring enthusiasm without it being judged, free to simply show up unrestrained. As we dive into this final part in this 3-part series, I am here to remind you that your players are not starving for more information. Your players are starving for more genuine connection, for more ability to be themselves. And the more you genuinely connect, the more free your players will feel, and the more powerful your team culture will be. Again, I share this because I am not naive. We'll get to this second. I'm not naive to how some in our world or in our industry view this side of the game. How some coaches might view this side of the game. I believe we're in a heyday of culture and positive energy in sports, a heyday of wanting deeper connection. And a perfect example is right now, US Lacrosse and TJ valuing this enough to say, let's do 3 webinars on the topic. Let's make it a part of our 4 things that we focus on when it comes to athlete development. And there are still those in our sport who view this stuff as the soft skills. And by this, they mean the soft and fuzzy, not for me kind of stuff. If you plan to implement this series of webinars, do not naively think everyone will be excited and on board. You will have skeptics and naysayers, and I am here to say from experience, I have connected with some of the best coaches in the business and at some of the best schools in the country. And I do not believe they are so successful because we worked with them. I know they're successful because they look at what we offer, what we're talking about here, as beneficial. They know it's the edge. It's an extra something that takes their athletes, their teams, and themselves to the next level. If you were on the first webinar, you know I'm a big Coach K fan, which brings us to this picture. I'm a Syracuse fan by birth, but as a coach, I deeply admire Coach K and what he's done at Duke. Well, just this past weekend, as I mentioned, I was at UNC, and after working with some teams and meeting with some coaches there, on my way home to Maryland, I stopped at Duke because I'd never been on campus before and just wanted to see campus and check it out. Well, if you've never been there, they have quite a bit dedicated to Coach K, his successes at Duke and everything he's created there. And as I'm looking at what you see here, they got his 5 national championship rings. They have his Olympic medals that he won. Here's one of his golds that he won on display there. And they have shrines to the players that have come through his program, the successes they've had. And I was reminded of one of my favorite quotes of his that I read in one of his books, and I believe is relevant for what we're going to be talking about tonight. And the quote is this: that a common mistake in sports is spending a disproportional amount of time on X's and O's as compared to time spent about people. time spent learning about people. If you followed Coach K's post-game interview after their 1-point win over UCF this past weekend, you know he lives this idea. This isn't just something he put in a book because it sounds good and it'll sell. He lives this. And last week we talked about this reality. We spend so much time on skill development versus the development of our energy, how we show up. And I believe the same is true for connection. We spend so much time on X's and O's, and we must spend that same time equally in connecting with our players and doing so effectively. So let's get into that. That's what we're talking about tonight. As with the last two webinars, the content we're about to talk about comes from booklets written by myself in partnership with Ryan Pinot, my business partner in this work, the founder of the Pinot Training Group. He himself has 16 years of experience creating powerful and positive team cultures with organizations in banking, medicine, healthcare, hospitality, higher education, you name it. This man has worked with every group, team, organization you can think of. And our other co-author, Brandon Johnson, also known in the world of hospitality as Positive Energy Guy, and is the author of the book, The Heart of Hospitality. Brandon brings a tremendous amount of experience implementing these principles in that space. And tonight you get me, the athlete coach in the group, sharing these principles and saying, how can we apply these in the world of sport? So let's dive in and talk about that. For starters, I believe that when we think about this idea of connection must be intentional. And I know that might sound simple, but the reality is I do not believe connection will happen organically on team bus rides, especially not today when most players have their headphones on and heads buried in their phones on most trips. I don't believe true connection amongst teammates and coaches will happen organically on team trips, whether it's across the country or across the world, overseas. I have worked with plenty of teams who take tremendously expensive trips for the purpose of team bonding, and yet their teams still have deep relationship challenges. Obviously, the expensive trip didn't work in that case. I believe we are grossly oversimplifying connection when we expect team dinners or outings to solve all of our relationship problems. None of those are bad. They are great and helpful. And we are underappreciating our young players' development when we expect simply time together to be enough. It is not enough. We must be intentional about that time together. Our group recently had the privilege of spending time with a team of women that compete at the Division I college level. This team, as we kind of shared in some of those examples, they live together, they breathe together. They're a group of individuals that spends every meal, every practice, class, a lot of their classes, and social time together. They are, by all definitions, connected. In fact, I remember the very first thing we did in the beginning of the day was to say, let's mingle, say some hellos, some good mornings, and the group kind of looks at each other and looks at us as facilitators with this sense of like, we already know each other. Why do we need to do this? So then we spend 12 hours in the training room kind of saying like let's really open up. Let's create real authentic connection. Let's let go. Let's get out of our own ways. And what happened was this real connection. I don't mean talking circles. I mean connection that is usually only reserved for weekend getaways or a closeness between a spouse or a relationship. Dare I say family. And I don't mean surface level family. If you're watching March Madness right now, you might have noticed that every team has the words family across their chest on their shooting shirts. And my first question to each of these teams would be, for how many of you does that word only live on the shirt? And I know these shirts were given to them by Nike. And there are coaches out there that'll decide this is our word of the day or the word of the year, as we talked about in the first session. And again, the question is, how many of you is this only lived on the shirt and not in real life? Sports does not need more surface level words, core values on the walls that aren't lived. We need real connection. We need real family level connection. And we got there with this particular team. And at the end, the team expressed this reality that we knew each other, but we didn't really know each other. And I'll paraphrase one comment that summarized the outcome. We know each other from freshman year and on. We know who dates who, classes we are taking, pop culture that we like, but we never really knew each other like we do now. I feel like everyone here is a part of me. This is a culture of connection. This is a team coming together. This is a team saying, now we really do have a connection, whether it's player to player or coach to player, if that's what you're looking to create. Here's a team, and we think of what we ask our teams to do. We expect them to get out of their way, trust each other, trust themselves, throw your hearts into the game, earn championship level points when the game is on the line. We're expected to throw our full selves into what we do as athletes, but they're not. We have athletes out there, they're not really living authentically with one another. They're in their heads. At some level, they're worried what other team members think of them, what coaches think of them. This sense of, am I good enough? Am I liked? Can I be me? Is a constant battle so many of us face when we are going into any group dynamic. So why would a team be any different? And that headspace is impacting how open we are, how much we connect, and it's taking away from how we invest in the team and in our team goals. It's easy to get behind the value of team members knowing each other. It's another thing to create a space where individuals feel like they can be known without fear or judgment. During a different training with a team, I could tell one athlete on the team was not really opening up. So I pulled her aside one-on-one and I said, "You're holding back." She laughed and said, "Yeah, I know." I said, "Well, of course you know. I know you know. I have 2 questions for you. Number 1, do you trust yourself?" And she said yes with a tone of, "Why would you even ask that? That's a stupid question." And so I asked my second question. I said, "Do you trust your teammates? Do you trust your team overall?" She paused for a second, started to get a little emotional. You could see that she was thinking about this. And she said no without any hesitation. She shared that her teammates roll their eyes at her when she tries to just be herself. They laugh at her, they pick on her, they judge her for who she is. She shared that her coach seems oblivious to this, and her coach's go-to way of communication with the team is sarcasm. This is not a family, and I think this is far too common in the world of sports. This is not connection, and this is holding this individual back and overall holding the entire team back. We worked with a basketball player one time who he was having his worst season on record, and come to find out he's battling depression, and he never shared that with his team. He never shared that with his coaches because, you know what, he didn't want to make people uncomfortable with the idea, or he didn't want repercussions from his coaches for sharing that, because that's the perception a lot of times of athletes. We worked with a softball player who was fraught with self-hatred about her body. She was battling her own body image issues, and she didn't share that because she didn't want the surface level encouragement that comes from people who aren't your genuine friends and family, or even the taboo that can be associated with body image. So she chose not to talk about it. We worked with a student athlete one time who had a child unexpectedly in college and was carrying those challenges between being a dad and the relationship with the mom, who he wasn't in a relationship with, but they're committed to raising this child as a unit, and going to school and having a social life and being a college athlete. And he didn't share this with his team. And his response was, because I didn't want to burden them with my personal problems. It's not that he didn't want to share it. He saw it as his personal problems. Leave it at the door. Don't talk about it. And on the flip side of the coin, his teammates were frustrated by his lack of emotional investment in the team, and they don't believe that for him, that this sport was the most important thing to him. And once you figure it out, it's like, newsflash, the sport isn't the most important thing to him. He's got life outside of his sport happening, but he never shared that. He never shared why that lack of investment was there. And once his teammates found out about it, it's not like you let him off the hook for low energy, but you have an understanding, you have a grace, you have an appreciation that this individual, like all of us, has life happening outside of our sport, outside of our job, outside of our work. It doesn't mean that you have to share your deepest, darkest secrets with everyone you know, but it does mean if we are going to call ourselves a team as we defined it on the first week, then this is the kind of stuff that we can't hold back because we don't want to burden others. If you have your own reasons, that's fine, but your reason shouldn't be because I don't want to burden these folks that I consider teammates. I had an athlete one time who wanted to quit drinking, but didn't share that with the team, individuals who should be her accountability partners, but she didn't share that commitment because she didn't think it'd be supported. She'd be laughed at, she'd be made fun of, she'd be called out for the challenges she was having with it. This is not the soft and fuzzy stuff. This is the only stuff. This is life. And what's at the root of all of this is this sense of, I don't talk about it, I don't want to be labeled, judged, I don't want to feel different. I don't want to be treated differently. The above stories were not shared because we sat in talking circles and asked individuals to share their biggest challenges. That kind of templated discussion, in my opinion, rarely gets authentic results or past the surface level. Those conversations came up organically because we created a space and fully invested in the commitment to one another. This brought the team to a real level of your goals are my goals, your challenges are my challenges. We all have hopes, we all have battles, we all share burdens, positive or negative, of this team. We share each other's burdens, we share each other's celebrations, and you are part of me, you are my family, your world is my world. Not family because it's on the shooting shirt, but family because that's what we value, that's what we represent. I truly believe that each of us has a tremendously deep desire to feel significant. We want to have a level of belonging, connection, and meaningful contribution to whatever space we're in. These are some of the basic needs of being human, in my opinion. And so my challenge, my call to action is, if you truly want to change the connections of you and your team members and create a powerful and positive culture that we've talked about, let's begin by taking time to truly understand your team. Let's not oversimplify it. Let's not undersimplify it. Let's get it right. When you know your team better, you are better able to cultivate their feelings of belonging, connection, contribution, and provide them that positive significance that we should be getting from sports. I believe there is a way to make sure we're doing this effectively. Here are my 2 rules for connection to make sure we are doing connection effectively. The first rule is know your people, and the second rule is replace sarcasm with sincerity. Those are it. Those are the rules, and I want to talk about what we mean by them. Let's start with number 1, know your people. As TJ's mentioned a couple times, my TEDx talk was called the 50 Cups of Coffee Challenge. This is not a shameless promotion. This is what the talk was about. The challenge is to have conversation like this with 50 people per year. This list should include your peers, your mentees, your mentors in life. It is through these types of conversations that the team I talked about earlier, this type of know your people conversations that the team I talked about earlier with the athlete that had a child on it, this grew out of the captain of that particular team said to me, there are some guys on this team I just don't feel connected to. What do I do? He wanted me to solve that problem. And so I told him, invite each of your players to a meal, share a cup of coffee with them, go for a run together, hit the gym together, go shoot together. And while doing this, say to them, I want to learn more about you. Simply ask them to share their story. And you share yours over an entire hour, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. Make it a significant chunk of time in this conversation of just giving that individual time to share and not interrupting, just saying, I'm here to learn about you with no agenda. This is when his teammate willingly shared that he has a 2-year-old son. And of course, it just never came up before. Not something you just offer to a group of people who you kind of know and maybe don't trust quite yet. And once this captain knew this, it transformed the relationship with the captain and the player, but also the relationship with the team, because he was given the grace and permission to share it with the team. A level of trust existed that wasn't there before. A level of understanding existed. I truly believe the shortest distance between 2 people is often a story, is often who you are, is often where you're coming from. Know your people. Make it your mission to know them. Take time to sit down with each of your players and simply say, tell me your life story and share yours. Be vulnerable, be open, be honest with your players. Take an hour, whatever amount of time it is, and just say, I'm gonna let you in a little bit of who I am, and I want to know a little bit of who you are. So to make sure these conversations are effective for you, these 50 cups conversations, these are my 4 kind of types of conversations you can have. The first type of conversation is what I just talked about. Know your player's life story, their journey, the factors that have played a role in who they are and their priorities. How do you trust those you really don't know? So many of us have never really taken the time to simply ask our players that at any age of what's your life story. It's as easy as taking that one-on-one time and allowing them to have the time to share without interruption. That's an important one. Sometimes in our trainings, we'll set it up where you get to talk for 3 minutes about your life story, and your partner who you're with can't say anything. can't interrupt, can't ask questions. There's a lot of us out there that are constant interrupters. When someone's talking, we're asking the question we want to ask, we're adding what we want to add, we're taking the conversation in a direction we want to go instead of just allowing people to talk and actively listen. There's a lot of when someone has that moment of not knowing what else to share and then they come up with some more stuff is when they're starting to get out of their head. They're starting to get off script. They're starting to say, oh, here's some cool things that you should know. And sometimes those seemingly minor things are what we really connect on a higher level. So give your players a space to be heard. Encourage your players to do that activity with each other and create enough time and energy and space where people just kind of lose themselves in the story they're sharing. Know your player's life story and get each player to do the same with each other. Number 2, know how your players see themselves. Each of us has a sense of who we are and what we believe of ourselves. What do your players love? What makes them tick? What are their strengths? What are their personal weaknesses, insecurities? Do they spend a lot of time reflecting on who they are and how they show up? And this is one of those that the first couple times you do it with a player one-on-one, you might not get the deepest, realist answers, but over time, again, when you build up that level of trust, when you're using our second webinar to show up with that energy that makes people feel they can take risks and makes people feel open, the second part of bringing that energy is having these conversations that dive into how do players see themselves, especially at the youth coaching level, at the high school level. This can be tremendously beneficial for you as a coach to fully understand this, to fully understand the confidence or insecurity that your player has at that age. And maybe you don't have to have the solution, but at least you know when you're interacting with that individual on a regular basis. Know how your players see themselves at that point in their life. How do they see themselves reflect on who they are and how they show up? Number 3, know their fillers and drains. We talked about these in our previous webinar on being intentional with your own energy. Well, know your players' fillers and drains. Know your assistant coach's fillers and drains. Influence is so much about how you leave people feeling. How do you know how you're leaving people feeling if you don't know what fuels them? If you don't know what adds to their energy tank, their emotional bank account, their energy bucket, whatever term you want to use, and what sucks the life out of them, what recharges them, and what takes energy from them, what motivates them and what demotivates them. It can inform how you coach, how you teach, how you mentor when you know fillers and drains for this individual. And you can know when you're doing something, a conversation, a question, a drill, a something that is going to be a drain for them. That doesn't mean you don't do it, but when you know it, you can address their reaction to that. And when you're bringing the filler into their world, you can remind them and celebrate that you're doing this filler for them. A lot of this stuff maybe we do unintentionally, and let's be more intentional and not assume my fillers and drains are the same as yours. Let's not assume that my fillers and drains when I was your age are the same as yours now, simply because I played the same sport, or maybe you see something in the player that reminds them of you at that age. Don't assume you know what fuels them, what motivates them, and don't you assume you know what demotivates them. Have the simple conversation of what are your fillers and drains, what motivates you, and what demotivates you, what sucks the life out of you. And maybe if you have a player that hasn't even thought about this before, this can be a great way to introduce this extremely important conversation when it comes to the energy that they're bringing to the team. Know your players and your coaches' fillers and drains. And number 4, know their goals, their hopes, their dreams. What makes your athlete come alive? What's their why? What gets them up in the morning and keeps them awake at night? What would they sacrifice it all for? Do you know their personal goals, their professional goals, their growth goals, their bucket list goals? I had an athlete one time at the Division I level who was playing at a very, very high level, Big Ten school, and shared that her main goal for her, a hope, a dream, was to get into medical school, a top medical school, and to be a doctor. I don't remember what type of doctor, but I do remember it was something that was going to require a full investment of her mental, emotional, physical, sleep, you name it. And at the time, she was being pulled by her coach to play a sport at the highest level, and that wasn't connected to her hopes and dreams. And so when the coach was trying to motivate her, was trying to connect with her, her, was trying to understand her. If the coach doesn't know that half of her head is always focused on the academic, the school, the medical side of things, that the sport isn't what like her real hope and dream, then there's a complete disconnect there. And it doesn't mean, again, that once you find out, you let her off the hook when it comes to playing the sport. It does mean, how do you pretend you know this individual when you're not fully clear on what their hopes, their goals, their dreams are, and when we just assume that it's somehow tied to our sport. I meet tons of club players at the high school level who, if you really truly ask them, their goal of going to college someday might be unrelated to playing their sport. Maybe they want to play on the club team because that's what their friends are doing. They love the travel, they like the coaches, but they have no interest in playing in college. Yet we just assume that that is their goal, their hope, their dream. Or maybe they have an interest in playing in college, but they don't have an interest in playing at the highest level they possibly can. Maybe they have a school they want to go to that the team isn't as gifted or talented as a lacrosse team, and that's okay for them. I have a player on my middle school team. He wore a Stanford hoodie to practice the other day, and he's a great lacrosse player, a player that I as a coach would identify as he's going to play in college someday and be really, really good. And I said to him, "What's with the Stanford hoodie? Do you like Stanford? Are you a fan of Stanford? Do you know someone who went to Stanford?" And he said, no, I just really love to go to Stanford. He's an 8th grader. I don't know what excites him about Stanford. Maybe the fact that it's Ivy League. Maybe he follows technology and knows Silicon Valley. Maybe he just likes the palm trees and the nice weather. I don't know. And I'm pretty confident he doesn't care that they don't have a men's lacrosse team, or he might not play lacrosse there, or he might play club there, whatever it might be. He just wants to go there. And now that I understand his hopes and dreams, his goals, I think that's important as a coach who's trying to guide and mentor this young man. It's a simple concept, and it's one that I think it's a concept I didn't used to share in the years past, thinking, well, that's too simple. I'm sure coaches are doing that. And the reality is coaches are not. We are assuming we know our players' hopes and dreams. We're assuming we know their life story. We are assuming we know how they see themselves. We are assuming we know their fillers and drains, and we're assuming we know their goals, their hopes, their dreams. It is unbelievable how an understanding of a person and the people around us can change from the simplicity of the above 4 conversations. You create understanding, you create connection, you create significance. I truly believe if you use these 4 questions, prompts, or guidelines with your players at any age, you will, without any agenda in mind, that you are truly going to connect with that player, with that individual. That's the idea of know your people. The second piece of this is replace sarcasm with sincerity. I've mentioned this before, and this is a point of emphasis for this webinar. We in athletics need to eliminate sarcasm from our language as coaches. When I work with teams, our commitment throughout the day of training with the athletes is that there is no sarcasm that takes place during the day. I'm an individual personally that loves sarcasm. I use it a lot. I think it's funny, and there's a time and a place for it. And I think that time and place does not belong in sports, in athlete development. I think sarcasm is not serving teams. It's not serving coaches. And too often, it is what replaces sincerity. It is what gets in the way of sincerity when sincerity makes us uncomfortable. For the majority of the day, when we work with a team, the coaches are not in the room. And at the end of our day, we bring the coaches in to join us for about 2.5 hours. And one of the processes we facilitate with the coaches back in the room is a feedback process. In this feedback process, each individual connected with the team, players, head coach, assistant coaches, director of operations, volunteer coaches, everyone is invited to participate in this process of feedback. I explain a principle that Jim Rohn wrote about in his book, The Art of Exceptional Living, that a tree in nature needs a mixture of both the sun and the rain to grow. If a tree in nature only receives sunshine and nothing more, that tree dries out, it withers away, it becomes brittle, and it is easily broken. When the level 10 storm comes through the forest, the weak tree is the first to topple. And the same is true of us. It's true for your players. If all we ever get is sunshine, if all we ever get is the positivity, if all we ever get is the you're awesome, you can do no wrong, you played great today, even when you know you didn't play great. If all we get is easy street, challenges are eliminated, roadblocks are pushed aside. If life is nothing but sunshine, we become weak and we are easily broken. Our roots are not deep, our roots are brittle. When life throws us level 10 challenges, we are not equipped to handle them. We topple and die a little bit inside. And the other side of that coin is if the tree only receives rain, nothing but downpour rain, nothing but constant rain, that tree drowns. It is overwhelmed in the rain and it dies. And the same is true of us and of your players. If all we get is you can do better, if all we get is step up, here's what you did wrong, here are your areas for improvement, if all we get is negative feedback, if life is a constant struggle and the challenges just keep coming, we get overwhelmed by it, by this need to constantly improve, by this constant uphill battle, and we drown in it. We die a little bit inside. We take less risk. We don't put ourselves out there because we're sick and tired of the rain. In order for a tree in nature to grow as tall as it can, it needs a healthy mix of both the sun and the rain. And so do you, and so do your players. And yet too many players that I encounter, they soak up the rain and they block out the sun. Compliments make them uncomfortable. Too many coaches do not provide enough of the sun. Their idea of connection is I am here to make you better, make you more. I am here to be hard on you. And you are, with a mix of both. And too many athletes do not take in enough of the rain. They want the journey to be easy, to be instant, to be painless. Some coaches are afraid to give the rain. They have interpreted this positive energy movement as never coming down on a player, never pointing out room for improvement, being the good cop in the good cop, bad cop situation. And this is crippling players when challenge inevitably comes their way. So we set up this process with an inside circle of individuals and an outside circle. Each individual on the inside circle goes up to each individual on the outside circle and says to them, the strength I see in you is. And then they'll say, and what I need from you is. Versions of this, depending on the team and what we're doing. A little of the sun and a little of the rain. What I admire and appreciate about you is, what I want to see more from you, and one way you're holding back. What I need more from you as a teammate or coach. What I need from you, period, as a teammate or coach. And there is one team I did this process with recently that really stands out to me when I think about this idea. With this particular team, the head coach is one who I know for a fact provides his players a healthy mix of both the sun and the rain. He is a coach who is invested in his players, knows their story, knows how they see themselves, knows their fillers and drains, goals, hopes, and dreams. He's an energy guy who cares. He's not going through the motions. He has the core values on the wall as soon as you walk into the locker room, and his players live those core values. They are not just words on a poster. They are a way of living. His team knows what they represent and what they do not tolerate. They live this stuff, and he is an individual that gives the sun and the rain without sarcasm. He does not operate from a place of sarcasm. He operates from a place of sincerity. A practice I learned from this particular coach with this idea is that I encourage you to take on and help you implement the 4 conversations and the sun and the rain conversation with sincerity. Is this coach has a policy that players must schedule 5-minute weekly meetings with him once a week for just 5 minutes. If you want more than 5 minutes, great, you got it, but 5 minutes is all that is required. And these meetings have nothing to do with sport. They are opportunities to have one or all of the 4 conversations. It's a let's talk about life kind of conversation. Again, if it's just 5 minutes and that's it, great. If you want more, we are going to take the time. And players look forward to these conversations because they know they're going to get some things that they can improve on, some sincere, this is what I love about you, this is what I admire about you, this is the strength I see in you, and some sincere, what more you can bring, never related to sport. It is focused on you as an individual, your growth. As a coach, you are a mentor and an educator, and these are great moments for that. Well, anyways, during this particular feedback process that I set up with this team, I was in earshot of where this coach was standing and could hear the players as they approached him. And I am not exaggerating what I'm about to say. each and every player approached their head coach excitedly, which, by the way, doesn't always happen. Sometimes, as you might imagine, players are intimidated by this process where they have to go up to their coach and share a strength and share an area of where they need more or whatever it might be. But not these players. They were excited. They welcomed it. They were joyous to share what they had to share with their coach. And each player said a different version of this. Coach, what I appreciate about you, what I admire in you, the strength I see in you is that you sincerely care about me as an individual, irregardless of my play. You care about me. You are invested in me. One player in particular, who on paper is arguably the most successful player, has played at the highest level of her sport in high school and at a previous college team, said, "And you are the first coach I have ever played for in my life who I can say that about." Think about that for a second. This player has played on club teams, has played on the all-star teams, has played on the sponsored tournaments. She at one point was at a school that is top 5 for her particular sport, has seen the success, has had a number of coaches. And she looks at this coach and said, "You're the only coach I've had where I can honestly say you care about me more than just an athlete. You care about me as an individual." And she meant it. And there's truth to it based on what I learned from her throughout the course of the day. This tough male coach, who he did not have dry eyes after this activity. He was moved by this. My question to you is, would your players say this about you? And regardless of your answer right now at the moment, if you would like them to say it, then pick that target and make that your mission. Pick the target, make that your mission to live this way so that players would say that about you. I believe this coach has built this level of connection because he is committed to a standard of extraordinary, honest connection, not forced or transactional, not sarcastic, and certainly not a good enough standard. I believe sarcasm is a good enough standard. Pick your target and be prepared to do the work to hit that target. And I sincerely hope that after these 3 sessions on team culture, you are moved to say, that's my target. That level of connection, that level of relationship is my target. That's my mission as a coach, to create a team environment, a personal energy, and a personal connection with each and every one of my teammates, my players, my coaches, so they know without a shadow of a doubt, I care about them as people. And make this happen with your players. What I'm talking about, the 4 conversations and the no sarcasm, like make that happen with your players too, so that each and every one of them knows that as well. On the first webinar, the Harvard Business Review study of what are some of the dynamics of an effective team, one of them was people that care about each other as friends. And again, I said, coaches will say, well, you don't have to be friends. 100%, you don't have to be friends. And you don't have to be an extraordinary coach. And you don't have to be a powerful and effective team culture. Pick your target and do the work to make that happen. Be a coach that without a shadow of a doubt, people know you care about them. You want to see them grow. You want to see them flourish. You want to see them live with confidence, and you want to see them connect as a team. I believe being a coach is a tremendous privilege, and each athlete over the course of their entire career will only have a handful of coaches. Think of that young woman who said, "I've never had a coach who I can say genuinely cares about me." And it doesn't mean they didn't care, but cares about me outside of my sport. And each coach will leave a lasting impression on an athlete. Each coach will have an opportunity to mold that individual, shape their personal core values, their personal beliefs, their attitudes, their outlook on life, how they view challenge, how they view themselves. As I said earlier, we worked with 80,000 people last year. And if I can be candid with you, I am sick and tired of hearing young athletes say, "I have no confidence because a coach stripped it from me. I'm afraid to be enthusiastic because my teammates laughed at me," knowing a coach led that team. "I'm afraid to take risks because every time I did and failed, my coach came down on me for that. And every time I did and succeeded, my coach said nothing. Or my coach praised me with sarcasm." I remember when I was in high school, I scored a left-handed goal, on the run goal, going down the side of the field, left-handed, high to low goal. And I can still remember how proud I was, how excited I was, maybe even a little bit shocked I was when the ball went in, because I'd been working my tail off on my offhand and developing my offhand, and my coaches had been on my case about it. And I remember I came off the field and my coach slapped me on the helmet and said, "Hey, every now and again, a blind squirrel finds a nut, huh?" And the assistant coaches laughed and other players laughed, and that was it. And I was not a quote unquote soft player. I laughed at it at the time. Quite frankly, it didn't even bother me too much, perhaps because I expected it. And in that moment, in hindsight, as an adult, as a coach now looking back, and this is not to throw shade, if you will, on my coach. I had tremendous coaches and tremendous respect for that individual. He was a great coach, and it's just so commonplace to go to sarcasm. And can you imagine if in that moment, that coach had the courage to look at a teenager and say with some level of sincerity, "That was a great goal. I know you've been working hard on your offhand. Keep that up. I'm proud of you." Instead of going for the laugh, instead of going for the joke and thinking that that builds deeper connection, have a moment of sincerity. I believe as coaches, we can do better than sarcasm, and we must do better. And this is not every coach. I don't mean to sound like I'm on some soapbox calling out sports, and I don't even think it's the majority. But from my experience, the majority is also not the coach I described earlier. The one whose players know without a shadow of a doubt that he cares about them. Without a shadow of a doubt, know that he is invested in them and is not afraid to have that sincere, honest conversation. I will share one last story about this particular coach as I believe it wraps everything up. The night before my training, I set up, and typically the director of operations or a grad student or a team manager will help me set up. But this particular night, the individual helping me set up clearly was a student, and she was called the undergraduate assistant coach. That was the head coach sent me an email. "Our undergraduate assistant coach is going to help you set up." I looked on their website. That was a curious title for me, and sure enough, it says undergraduate assistant coach. So I asked the individual when they showed up, I said, "What is an undergraduate assistant coach?" And she kind of chuckled and she said, "After my freshman year playing here, I was forced to medically retire because I've had too many concussions. This was a really hard decision to make. This sport is everything to me, and I can't afford to go to school here without my scholarship. And I really love it here. I didn't know what I would do if I wasn't part of this team. I was scared I would have to move home. So coach decided to make me an undergraduate assistant coach. I get to keep my full scholarship, and I get to coach. I coach at practice. I'm on the bench at games. I meet with players, which she said is kind of crazy because a lot of them are my age and my former teammates. But I am a coach, 100%. It's not a coach in name only. She's an assistant coach on this team. And she said it with a bit of, and she serves as a team manager as well, certainly some of those logistic things, but she is appreciated as a coach. And she had a huge smile on her face as she shared this. And I sat there and I thought to myself, like, the amount of teams I've worked with and the amount of players that have been forced to medically retire or injured or whatever it might be. And this is a prime example of valuing your people, of valuing your players, over their record, over your own wins and losses, valuing them over money, over, instead of finding a way to get that scholarship back. This coach has said for 3 years, I am going to invest in you. I am going to essentially give you your scholarship to be a coach and a manager for our team. This player, as a result of this, would move heaven and earth for her coach. And when we walked into the locker room, I saw the standard core values framed on the wall, same stuff we talked about in the first webinar. And I asked her, "Do you guys live these?" I always ask that. You can tell from the body language, from the facial expressions, from the way they answer if they do or don't. Most don't. Most respond with a laugh of, not really, coach loves these, but you know how it is. This player looked at me without hesitation, with a sense and a tone of, "Why would you even ask?" And she said, "Oh my gosh, of course. These are our core values." No hesitation, no sarcasm, no sense of, "Yeah, but we live them at a good enough level." 100%, these are our values. This is how we do things here. We don't tolerate those who don't live these, and we celebrate those who do. This is a culture of heart, a culture of energy, and a culture of connection. To wrap up this webinar, I want to bookend it with another Coach K quote. The bottom line, this is again in one of Coach K's books. The bottom line on communication is that everyone on a team should feel comfortable expressing themselves. The freedom to express oneself to other members of a team, business, or family breeds a sense of ownership. And most importantly, each member of the team knows that when we look each other in the eye and communicate, we are honest. That type of communication can help turn a group of individuals into a true team. We started this entire series by saying, how do you find a team? What does it mean to be a true team? If you would like to be a true team, you know what you have to do. Pick that as your target and start doing the work today. Do the work to connect. Know your players and do the hard work that comes from making sincerity a bigger part of your conversation than sarcasm might be. As always, if you'd like any of our booklets and posters, please simply email me your mailing address and I'll send them your way. If you've already emailed me your mailing address, please know that they are on the way. I want to remind you of our core principles as an organization. Be you, lead from the heart, make a difference. Be you, be authentically you, be the best version of you. This isn't about changing who you are. This is about showing up as who you were put on this earth to show up to be. Lead from your heart, get out of your head, trust yourself, cultivate athletes that lead from their heart, that get out of their own way and just show up for their team, for themselves, for the world, and commit to making a difference. As a coach, you have a privilege. You are an educator, you are a mentor, you are a parent figure for many individuals. So commit to making a difference on your team, in your players' lives, and in the world of sport. If you're a lacrosse coach here with US Lacrosse, commit to making a difference in our sport so that we can make this a culture that sets the pathway for other sports, so that sports look at lacrosse and say, what are they doing so differently there, that people who play that sport really embody this stuff. And we can sit back and say, we are a sport of our commitments. We're a sport of energy. We're a sport of people that live from their heart. I invite you to connect with me on social media. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I'd love to engage in conversations like this. Instagram and Twitter for me is not a passive place. It is a great place to have conversations, ask questions, talk, and use those platforms for actual social media. And if you've joined us or have listened to all 3 of these webinars, I also want to just say, please know I honor you, I appreciate you, and I do not take it lightly that you as a coach have decided to value these conversations. I deeply believe these are the conversations we as coaches and athletes need to be having. We are doing the culture of our sport a huge disservice if we are not valuing this side of the game as much as we do the skill side of the game. With that, I want to once again thank you, TJ, and I will hand over the controls to you to take us home.
Awesome. Thank you, Bobby. Fantastic session as always. I think what really brought it home, having been a part of all 3 sessions in getting these things up and running for everybody, is just seeing the complete package that you've put together here, and the tools and the resources. And really the most powerful part is the stories. I got chills when you started talking about the young lady who's the undergrad student assistant coach. To think, in this super competitive world of college athletics and, a Division I team and the limited amount of funding that they have to provide scholarships, that coach, valued her so much to take that scholarship and allow her to stay on campus and to still serve the team and the sport that she loves so much, and him to not be transactional and say, hey, sorry, you can't play anymore. Give me my money back. I'm going to find somebody new. That's what it's all about. That's why we coach, because that's somebody that's made a difference in that young lady's life, and she's going to remember that forever. And, the whole pay it forward model, she's destined to do great things for other people in her life because of, somebody doing something great for her at a time of struggle.
Yeah.
So, that was fantastic, Bobby. Fantastic. So it does not look like we had any questions submitted, which means you crushed it as always, Bobby. You gave a fantastic presentation with some really great tools and strategies. So we're going to wrap up here, and I'm going to just kind of issue a challenge, if you will, is, professional development is really great, right? We go to a seminar, a one-day thing, or we attend and participate in a 1-hour webinar. But now it's, what do you do with it, right? It's really cool to say that I'm doing all this stuff, but what are you going to do with it? To Bobby's point, how are you going to use this information to make a difference? how are you going to impact 1, 2, 3, however many lives of the athletes that you coach? A good friend of US Lacrosse's, John O'Sullivan, often uses the quote that your influence is never neutral, right? You are either building somebody up or tearing somebody down, and it's never neutral. Nobody leaves the same as when they came in to meet with you or attended practice or a game or whatever it is. So, my challenge to you is take this and do something with it, right? Even the littlest things, can have an incremental impact, and the power of all of those small things across the vast amount of players you may have on your team accumulate into a major difference at the end of the day. So that's my challenge to you, right? Our challenge is to provide the best resources we can, and our challenge back out to you then is to take those resources, go forth and be brilliant. So Bobby's information is up on the screen there. If you haven't had an opportunity to copy that down, certainly encourage you to. He is, as he said, pretty active on social media and enjoys having that conversation. So encourage you to reach out if you haven't done that yet. And that is that. Again, you'll be receiving an email in the next 24 hours with a recording of this session. So feel free to share that with friends, family, and anyone else you would think it is valuable to. And also, if you found some kind of value in this webinar that we've been able to provide to you free of charge, hop on over to uslacrosse.org and click on the donate button, right? Whatever you feel is it's worth to you, whether that's $1 or $10 or $1,000, right? Whatever, every little bit helps so that we can continue to provide great content like this to our members and non-members alike for really no charge other than a little bit of your time. So with that being said, Bobby, thank you so much. And to all of our attendees, thank you. Go forth, be brilliant, and make a difference in some kids' lives. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.